Are we good?
1 minute.
Okay.
YouTube is signing in, and we are good, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of the Temporary Traffic and Safety Committee. I'm going to kick it off by reading the pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, an act relative to the extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law July 16th, 2022. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted. This is being live streamed on YouTube, so feel free to log in and watch. So to get started, I'd like to welcome everybody in attendance tonight. We'll go through a roll call vote. Mark McMenemy.
Here.
Bill Pierce.
Here.
Janine Callahan.
Janine, I think you're muted.
Oh no. It's okay.
I'm here.
Welcome. We're so happy you're here. Mitch Cohen.
I am happy to be here too.
Great. And Scott, we're so happy to have you considering the weather that we've got today. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, it's great to see everybody again. And we're going to walk through the agenda and get started on this evening's meeting. The first item that we have is acceptance of the January 30th, 2023 meeting minutes. Would someone like to make a motion to approve that?
Moved.
And would somebody like to second?
I'll second it.
Well, is there any feedback? Hopefully everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the January 30th meeting. Were there any changes or updates that you'd like addressed during this meeting? Sounds great. So we'll do a roll call vote and make sure this is approved. Mark McMenemy.
Aye.
Bill Pierce.
Aye.
Janine Callahan.
Aye.
Mitch Cohen.
Mitch Cohen, aye. Although I was not at the meeting, I did watch the video, so I can confirm that meeting minutes match with the video.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then I, Laura, am also an aye. Thank you so much. So the next topic on our agenda this evening is to review the Select Community Questionnaire results. I thought last meeting having that interactive discussion around the communities was helpful. So for a format today, well, actually, the first step, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. The first purpose of our charge is to decide if a temporary, if a permanent traffic safety committee is something that would be good for our town and something that we would want to proceed with. So just, you know, in line with that, I wanted to open up that discussion today based on the research that we've seen. A majority of the communities do have them that have major highways going through them. And I just wanted to get your feedback now that you've really had a chance to dig into the communities and, you know, gather your feedback about what you think as far as how this would be for Northborough. Would anybody like to kick it off? Sure, Bill.
Sure. I think from, you know, the data that we collected initially, like you said, you know, the towns that have highways going through them, like Northborough, seem to have these, a lot of these same issues and therefore have a traffic safety, some type of traffic safety, either committee or meetings, you know, regular meetings to go over these items. So I think that confirms at least that, you know, we're on the right track in the town of Northborough to do that as well. I'm curious what everyone else thinks.
Mitch.
Yeah, I agree with what Bill said. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think there's tremendous value in having particularly a public board that the public can go to with their concerns and questions, as well as to see the discussion and deliberation about those issues. That's something we don't have now. That isn't to say that things are falling apart, things are not falling apart, but there are things I think we can do better at. And I think the public has the right to see us as a town do a little bit better in this regard.
Sorry, got a dog situation here. They want to have their voices heard as well. Janine, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just I want to go off of what you guys were just saying, you know, and speaking to the towns that I was assigned to, I see how well it's working for these towns. So I just feel that it will be beneficial for Northborough, especially if we take the information that we have from all these different towns and tweak it to work for us. So I agree. I think it would be really beneficial.
And Mark, did you have any thoughts? You're up.
Yeah, I guess when I was talking to Winchester, they brought up a good point that kind of converted me. They talked about how they see their traffic committee as really a way for the DPW to get to the Board of Selectmen directly versus being kind of talked back by people that manage money. So it was a nice way to get their voice heard. So they actually appreciated that. I mean, other than that, I think the DPW does a pretty good job. So I don't want to complain about them or anything like that. I've looked at statistics from every angle, and Northborough is right on par with every other town, you know, based on our population. You know, I've sorted different accidents and all that type of stuff. And, you know, it's very predictable based on population. So I think it would be beneficial. But I also think that they've got a good handle on things the way they are too.
I appreciate all that you do, Scott. And I know that when we kicked this off, we really wanted to find a way to help alleviate some of the pressure on staff and to help really complement what you're already doing. But this is just, I understand where you're coming from, Mark. So do we need to take a vote on whether we agree that this committee should move forward, or do we just move on to the next step on the agenda? Hi, Scott, sure thing.
I just wanted to
yeah.
echo what Mitch had said a little bit. You know, you folks have heard the process we have internally when traffic concerns come up. That happens every time. It happens more timely sometimes, depending on what staff are doing. If there's a storm going on, it may take a day or two. But Mitch, you know, having an open forum where citizens can look and say, oh, you know, they are doing it. They are taking it seriously. It is being addressed professionally. I think it'll be beneficial for the communications I have with the residents that reach out to us.
That's great. I appreciate it. And having your support is really so critical and important to the overall solution, and having everybody working together towards, you know, safer roads is definitely, it's a benefit for all of us. So do we need to take a vote as a committee, or do we just move on to the next agenda item?
I would recommend that you take a formal vote in support of recommending a permanent traffic safety committee to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion for the board.
You can ask for a motion if you'd like.
Oh, sorry. Can someone please make a motion to make a recommendation to the Northborough Board of Selectmen in favor of a permanent traffic safety committee?
So moved.
Would somebody like to second that?
I'll second it.
Great. So the discussion is on the table. Is there any other feedback that anyone would like before we take a vote?
Just for everyone watching this only provides the guidance for us to continue with our discussions, and then further later down the road, make a vote on what we want that committee to look like.
Thank you, Mitch. Appreciate it. Okay, great. So we'll do a roll call vote again. Mark McMenemy.
Yes, I'll vote aye.
You, Bill Pierce.
Aye.
Janine Callahan.
Aye.
Mitch Cohen.
Mitch Cohen, aye.
Great. And Laura, I'm also an I. Thank you very much. So as far as, the next steps, there's so many different ways that we can go about this. We're moving along great in terms of research. So for the next, phase of this, I thought we could break down the different criteria that would be included in a permanent traffic safety committee. That would include the membership, appointing authority, meeting frequency, all of those topics that we've already researched. What I'd like to do this evening is just walk through them with you. We can kind of gather our feedback, gather our thoughts on what we'd like to see, and start working on that first draft. From that first draft, if we've got any, gaps that we need to gather further information on, we'll have plenty of time to be able to do that. But this way we can really start getting a working document going. So as far as like the different criteria, you're welcome to throw in your thoughts about what you think are important as far as the what to be included in the traffic safety committee. Sure, Janine.
So I think one of the most important things that I've learned from talking to different towns is how that information is relayed to the traffic safety committee. So whether that be an email that's on the website, Facebook page, something, a kind of a gathering point where people can go to that is easily found.
And I think Facebook is a great tool for some segments. I think the website in town is there's a lot of different areas that I think we should put that, but definitely accessibility is something that's important. Does anybody have any thoughts? Do you prefer a web form, an email address? What do you think would be the easiest? Sure, Bill.
So I think I would stay away from, social media. I mean, we can link the social media,
Yes.
but you never know if Facebook is going to go away, right?
Yep.
So you don't want your basis to be Facebook, right? I think the
Agree.
basis should be probably an email group, and maybe a page on the town website, under the committees area for people to go to link to that email. I don't know, Scott, will they generally do like a phone number as well for people that don't use email? Although I don't know how many people don't use email at this point.
That's a good point. I know I know some folks in town that don't have email.
My thought is that a web form, well, a dedicated page, as it would be for any board or committee or commission, is logical. A web form in there to submit inquiries is logical. That will result in an email that goes to certain members. That email will likely go to a staff liaison if there's one. If there's multiple staff members that are participants, it would go to them, and then it would likely go to the chair and vice chair. You could have it go to all committee members. You just want to be cautious that they're not deliberating inadvertently. Regarding the social media, I strongly recommend social media not being a mechanism to submit formal requests.
Yes.
Everything that's submitted is a public record, and the anonymity of social media doesn't really lend itself well to open and transparent government, where people can just have random Facebook pages submitting things that really don't warrant staff and committee attention.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to state it as a tool for gathering information, but more for advertising how people can go about. But there's just a variety of social media that we can share that page on just to raise awareness. But definitely, I agree, social media is not a good place to gather information.
Yeah, when I said social media, I did not mean for people to like, hey, I need a stoplight here or whatever. It was more of like an informational type of tool. Like, say, DPW decided that we were going to put a crosswalk someplace, and just like, how do we get that information across to people that are listening and following? So I think that that's important also. So I think that's one thing that we need to figure out is how we get the information on things that we are working on or have been approved. How do we let the residents know that those things are happening?
Perfect. Yeah, it's a great topic. Okay.
Sure.
Um,
I could
yeah.
follow along to that. One of the, I completely agree. You know, we would have for this committee once established a page for it, and there would be a web form that we would figure out who that would go to. One of the things we need to figure out, and I don't have a specific recommendation now, but we'll work on it, is the DPW has a report and issue section of forms, which I think they probably either all go to Scott or they go to the various department heads that are responsible for those issues, to figure out and make clear to the public when one of those issues, or a safety issue, a traffic safety issue, would also go to the board. Is that automatically copied to the board or to the board chair at that point, or is it just routed to the DPW, and then but the person filling out the form says there's, you know, an appeal process, or if you want to continue the dialogue at a public meeting, go over here. That's just an open question to get figured out. It's an implementation detail, but I think it's important so that we don't lose the quick access that the public has to the department right now, which is important and will continue to exist, while also having this additional avenue for some of the larger and more complicated issues that I suspect the Traffic Safety Committee would have under its jurisdiction.
Well, maybe a good approach through the chair would be to maintain a bit of separation between traffic safety concerns and DPW. The DPW report and issue are more urgent issues. There's rapid triage on them, get them out there, get it taken care of right away. I have statutory requirements to respond and address certain ones quickly. If something was to come to the DPW that was, for example, Janine's comment, I would like a crosswalk at this location. You know, me as a director and likely a liaison or member of the Traffic Safety Committee would then send it along to that safety group. I just don't want somebody putting something into DPW saying it's a traffic safety issue and it's a gigantic pothole in front of a school in a crosswalk, and it just kind of sifts off to the committee, and it doesn't get the urgency it needs. That's a concern.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking in terms of like how the requests are routed. One of the benefits during one of my interviews that I had conducted was that the traffic safety would field those initial requests. You know, absolutely your staff liaison would be involved, but then the committee would meet and then they would review what's feasible and possible and do it in one meeting, so that if the public did want to participate, they could join. The DPW would be there to help guide that. But ultimately, we want to just continue to complement what you're doing and not add extra work. So maybe a next consideration based on that routing question would be like, what would be a good makeup from this committee? I know in our interviews, we've seen everything from all staff to all residents and everything in between. What would be a good fit for Northborough? Yeah.
I'll get it started anyways. So Scott, I don't want to volunteer you, but I think the DPW plays a major role in the traffic safety group, and I think as a staff liaison, I think that would definitely be needed. After that, I've actually been giving this some thought, and I'm wondering what everyone thinks about members of the public appointed by different committees within Northborough. So for example, 2 from Board of Selectmen, one from Planning Board, one maybe from the school committee, and one from the moderator to make up 5 members of the public. The only problem with that is, I don't know that we're going to get anyone with expertise, right? That's one of the biggest concerns I would have is, where does the expertise come in of traffic safety? Obviously Scott would be guiding that, but that's gonna be one of the, I think, the bigger issues that we've got to really think about.
I would strongly recommend that a representative from PD be present. Either as a lead, it doesn't necessarily be a voting member, but certainly someone with that expertise. There's substantial, legal ramifications with recommendations as there are engineering. So, myself and Fred can handle all the engineering stuff, but as far as, traffic laws and things like that, all I know is what I was taught 100 years ago at driver's ed.
I think that, there are two aspects to it. Who are the members of the committee, meaning those who vote, and then who makes up the entire body of the discussion. So, for example, at the Board of Selectmen, we have 5 members of the public that are members of the board, but we have a town administrator that plays an extremely critical role to that process. We couldn't function without that somebody in that role, and then all the department heads feed into that. I sort of look at it as the Board of Selectmen generally should probably appoint the members of this board. I'm not opposed to some. I could see it either way. As far as other committees also having appointing authority, the downside of that split is the risk of having a harder time getting diversity among the residents. So, for example, I'd want to make sure that we didn't appoint, a majority of the members of of this committee that were all in the same neighborhood, for example, because then those are all. It's going to be very weighted potentially towards that one issue. And that's harder to deal with when you have appointing authority that's spread out. As I said, I could be convinced otherwise, but that's kind of the way I lean. And I definitely lean towards the voting members being those who are appointed to the committee by the Board of Selectmen or by whoever is doing the appointment. But there needs to be a critical aspect of it, DPW director or designee, police chief or designee, possibly the fire chief or designee. I could see some aspect there. Town planner or designee may want to play a role. I think those are some of those things. But as with most other boards and committees, the public is making the decisions for the public. And I see the voting responsibility being primarily and exclusively to those members.
Were there any other, so, as far as the makeup, so it sounds like we're going to want a mix of town staff and residents. Does that sound like we're on the right page as far as that goes? Or we're on the same page?
Yeah, I think, what do you call membership of the committee? Is really the aspect that I was trying to get to with the latter description, that whether you'd say, for example, DPW director or designee, my opinion is this is a public body, so it's the members of the public who are appointed to that committee that should be the voting members of the committee. Yes. Is the DPW director or designee a member of the committee still, but without voting authority, or are they one of the staff liaisons? I think that's probably splitting hairs, but we need to split that hair.
Through the chair, to the chair, I should say. I think it's a pretty important topic that Mitch is bringing up, both from obtaining a quorum as well as voting with a majority. If staff is considered part of it and FD's on it and there's an incident, they're not here, it gets complicated the more bodies you have to get a meeting scheduled, and two, to obtain a quorum, and then to get a majority vote. So I'm indifferent because I'm staff, but just another thing to be aware of, that's all.
And there are probably going to be aspects to topics of discussion where we would really need the DPW director, but there might be a particular topic of discussion that is much more police department related. So making sure the police chief or designee was there. And if Scott, you had to be off doing something else, that wouldn't detract from that one topic of the meeting, for example.
Bill.
I'm just wondering, Mitch, what you were saying sort of makes sense. I'm wondering if we do this by voting precinct. So we have 4 voting precincts in Northborough. So 1 from each precinct and then 1 member at large, appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
We don't have any committees or anything that I'm aware of by now, like that takes.
But this way we can make sure that we get the whole town.
I mean, it's a neat idea. I don't know if I want to break new ground like that with a committee like this. I mean, it's an intriguing idea. I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. One of the things, I live on the north edge of town, and I noticed that the population mass is on the south edge, and the majority of the things that happen in town happen where the population center is. So we kind of feel left out sometimes.
Yeah.
Bill lives right near me too, so.
Yeah, by precinct I don't think would guarantee that, because the precincts all feed right into downtown and spread out from there. Yeah, it's an intriguing idea.
And I do love the idea of a diverse committee in terms of, ages and, where they live, just to get you're going to get the best solutions when you've got that mix of discussion.
Yeah.
So I like it. What were you going to say,
We're in a
Mitch?
committee with 5 white guys with beards.
Oh. Perfect. So we can certainly continue. I'll put a draft together of all of these as we go, and we can look at it again as we go forward, but that's great. Another topic that I thought will be important for this committee is their charge. We've had a good feeling and kept us focused on ours. Actually, was there anything else from a makeup perspective before I move on to the charge topic? Sorry about that.
It sounds like, just for consensus here, the thought is 5 citizens appointed, likely by the board, but how geographically or demographically is up for discussion, and then staff support as needed, but a primary liaison will likely be me, with FD and planning, and brought in as needed, like we see at the planning board meetings and the Board of Selectmen meetings. It sounds like that's kind of the summary of where we are, right?
That was my understanding. You did a great job recapping it. Anybody have anything? Are we good? Okay, great. So the next topic that I thought is important is the charge of this committee. And this is, I think this part will probably really take up the majority of time. And this is probably going to be the part that we're going to want to really consider, because it's the most important part of what this committee is going to do. And we've seen such a broad range of charges for different traffic safety committees. So I'd love to open up that topic for discussion.
Yes, I'll kick this one off as well. So one of the things I do for my day job is policies, right? And for state policies, one of the things they always tell you is don't be specific, right? Be broad. So we've got to be careful with the charge that we don't lock this committee into something that 10 years from now won't have anything to do in the town anymore, right? So, keeping it open to things like, pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, but not getting into the specifics of what the pedestrian safety is, will leave them open to be able to make those conversations later on. That's my only input into it.
Did anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of different efforts going on. There's complete streets, there's safe streets, there's safe routes to school. We got to know who's doing what already, and we don't want to duplicate something.
So I don't think we have a Safe Streets committee. Is there an application in process for the town taking advantage of that? Would we be overlapping that? I'm not 100% sure
I don't know,
on
I
that
think
one.
that's the brand new one that just came out last
Mhm.
month with the stimulus package.
We are a safe routes to school community that was adopted a few years ago. We are a complete streets community that was approved late last year, well, 2 months ago. Safe streets, we are not participated in yet. We have received grants from Mass DOT's Safe Streets and Spaces. And I think one of the, when you say the term transportation, there's a lot of different interpretations of that. As an engineer, for me, it's roadways, sidewalks, vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, transit, but that's not really applicable here, but it can be with the Worcester Regional Transit Authority over at the Senior Center. From my perspective, traffic safety is not trails, is not trailhead parking lots, is not a parking lot, is not the crosswalk at the town hall. That, in my opinion, is not traffic safety, that's facility. But that's just my engineer's interpretation of it. What I don't want to see is a productive committee get segmented into an aqueduct trail or, Watson Park bike of the boat ramp. So I just, when you're thinking about what Bill's point was, which was great, a little bit of finite focus would be helpful.
I think I saw one town, I don't remember which one, that separated the trails into recreational and multi-use. So where the multi-use ones could be used for safe routes to school, but the recreational was a totally different effort.
Yeah, I
So, oh yeah,
wouldn't see this as having, or yeah, I kind of agree with what Scott was saying. That where people go along the public way and their safety is kind of what I'd like to define here. And I agree, something within a parking lot generally would not be something that a traffic safety committee would be involved in, because that's not along a public way. How to get that into language, I'm not sure. But I completely agree with what Bill says. It should be broad, descriptive, but not detailed, so that it can accommodate things going forward. I mean, if we say, well, we're going to be dealing with pedestrians and bicyclists, someone's going to come down with a scooter and say, whoop, we can't talk about scooters. And what happens when one of these scooter companies wants to put 100 electric scooters downtown? The traffic safety committee should probably have some involvement in that, or I don't know, future hovercraft or something like that.
these are exciting modes of transit to look forward to.
You've never seen this. I don't know if you've ever seen a city that had these electric scooters everywhere littering the sidewalks. It's exciting, might not be the right word.
Oh my God, that sounds like a nightmare. Jeez.
Yeah.
You go hovercraft, you'll save a lot of money on snow and ice.
There is that.
So one thing that I think we need to keep in mind is just thinking about the safe routes to school. I know that, Scott, you said that we're already part of that. I don't know, when my kids were in school, I don't think it existed. But I know something like that takes a lot of volunteers, through the school. So I don't know, is that something that traffic and safety would spearhead, knowing that we're a safe routes to school town. And then when you break it down into the different schools, like I said, they're looking for a lot of parent volunteers and teacher volunteers. So I guess maybe, we would take charge of that, looking for volunteers. I think that's something that we need to keep in mind, because I think a lot of these require more people than what's just on the committee. Does that make sense? Like, the committee isn't going to go over to Peasley or Lincoln Street or Milliken, and unless we do, and look for volunteers for the walk to school Wednesdays or whatever, and looking for volunteers to help with something like that.
So the Safe Routes to School program is a grant program through Mass DOT that will fund physical improvements to accent and improve pedestrian and cycle access to schools. It is driven by the school districts and departments. They are generally the applicants for funding. My suggestion is that this committee, or any of the committee, the boards, planning board, if something comes up that is in that realm, it gets directed to the school department so that they can spearhead a physical project for Safe Routes to Schools. And what usually happens is they come back to me and they say, what do you think? And we work with an engineering company and come up with solutions and get a grant application in. But the applications are driven by the schools. It's a little bit different than like Complete Streets, which is the general community, Board of Selectmen, Public Works. So this would be more of a complement to the schools, Safe Routes to Schools program.
I
Perfect.
just know that when I dug into it a little bit, they do offer obviously that, but I know that there were a lot of little like satellite programs that they were willing to help with. Those are just the ones that I'm talking about, not the overall funding and
Okay.
and things that you just mentioned, Scott. It was more of the volunteer type information that they're willing to help with.
Mhm.
Perfect. So I'm going to take a shot at drafting that up, and I'll represent that when we meet next. But I understand we want to take it broad, not too in depth, not too detailed, and there'll probably be some work on that one. The next category, I think funding is another one that came up in a lot of our discussions. I see this as being advisory to the selectmen still, but what are your thoughts based on your research about the funding conversation for the Traffic Safety Committee?
Yeah, I
So-
still see this. Oh, go ahead, Janine.
Go ahead. No, that's okay. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I still see this as exactly like you said, Laura, just, advisory to the Board of Selectmen. I don't know that there would be any funding required for,
Yep.
Anything this board would be doing on its own. Unless it was something like some type of traffic safety, some third party to come in and do a study. Right. But that may be, we're going to recommend that to the Board of Selectmen, and then the Board of Selectmen would actually, perform that function, or the DPW. Scott, I don't know if what the process would be in town for that.
It would likely be through the chair, likely be similar to what the planning board does with their consultant fund. They get a $5,000 consultant fund. Generally, it always goes towards CMRPC to provide services and advice. And it's not a lot of money, but that is directed through the planning board by the planner through the planning board to CMRPC to provide services. That would be probably the extent that I would see a traffic safety committee having funding. A relatively nominal amount of money, call it $5,000 a year. It gets you some traffic counts, some videos of some intersections. Your staff liaison is, we're professionals, we're responsible for managing budgets. And if there was a substantial initiative where the committee became unanimous that we want rapid flashing reflectorized crosswalks at every school, and it costs $28,000, that's a little bit different. But that's kind of how I would see a funding structure for this committee.
And that's very similar, I think, to all the towns we've researched. They have their budget, and they don't carry a budget, but they'll advise to the selectmen and then work through their discussions, or I guess their initiatives that way. Perfect.
Yeah.
Then sure, Mitch.
Sorry, I just want to add agreement that's what I saw in some of the committees that I did a little bit of research on. Is they have a small standing budget for some of those sort of basic tasks, like what Scott was describing, of doing a quick traffic count and doing a couple of little things here and there to help formulate plans, but construction plans would be separate, and that wouldn't be something that we would oversee.
Yep.
We would recommend solutions that would be, the example is adding a particular type of crosswalk at all the schools, or adding a different type of traffic light or something like that. And then it would go through the budgetary process. I could imagine the Traffic Safety Committee at some point wanting to do a more thorough traffic study of some part of town and want to do a lot of traffic counts. And that would be a one-off situation. And that would be a separate budgetary process that we would request that funding through town meeting or whatever the revenue source is. And it would then get funded and done separately. But I like the idea of, $5,000 isn't what I would call a token amount, but because you can do some real work with that. But something in that ballpark makes a lot of sense to give the committee some tools to get some work done without having to ask the DPW to use some of its funds for every little thing. And I suspect that may have been in the back of Scott's mind also.
A little bit.
Because that would be the other way to do it. The other way to do it is, I think every committee in town, it gets a $500 budget as sort of a base. And that wouldn't get a lot of work done by this committee. But then we'd be asking Scott to do more work. So the other way to approach it is we make sure that Scott gets an extra $5,000 in his budget every year that's sort of quietly earmarked for things that the Traffic Safety Committee want to do. But rather than burden you with that responsibility, I think it makes sense to be under the committee.
That's great. Thank you so much. Again, we can continue to improve this as we go along. This is just to get our first draft together. How about meeting frequency? How often do you think this permanent committee what would be a good benchmark for meeting, schedules? Would it be monthly, as needed? We've been across the board on that one too.
Yeah, my gut feeling is not to dictate anything in a charge.
Okay.
Because this committee is going to form and needs to figure out its own way in that regard. My gut feeling is monthly.
Yeah.
If we wanted to put something in there that, for the first 12 months, it will meet at least monthly. And then I wouldn't want to constrain them from meeting either less or more frequently if they had a better way of getting their work done.
Great. I think that fits. Did anybody have any other thoughts on the meeting frequency topic? Now, I had drafted, those were kind of the topics. Have I missed anything else that you think is important to include in the overall, role and responsibility of the committee going forward?
So I just,
and if not,
I just have a quick question about the meetings. And I don't know if this is the time to talk about this, but I'm wondering if the meetings will be open to the public where they can call in and communicate their concerns, just like a Board of Selectmen or a planning board meeting. Or is it just something that they can watch and then, follow up later with an email?
So if I could, Janine, so you're asking about the ability to sort of call in via Zoom or some other technology. That's something that we don't yet have control over, because under state law, the law under which we are operating to have this meeting by Zoom actually expires at the end of next month. And in all likelihood, the legislature will continue it or eventually make it permanent. But what that looks like, especially as far as hybrid capabilities and things like that, we don't know yet. I would put something in the charge general about encouraging public participation in the meetings. But I don't think I would put anything more detailed in there, just because we don't know what that's going to look like next, in 2 months, let alone in 2 years.
Well, yeah, because I'm so used to Zoom, right? And calling in. And so you're right. It maybe in 2 months, you're going to have to go down to town and sit and listen to a meeting in person, which is great. But I'm just wondering if it's going to be open to the public or not. So yes, a general open to the public, however, the means are at that time in person or via Zoom.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if
Yeah,
people
I
would
think
be able to communicate.
encouraging that public participation sort of implies if you're allowed to do Zoom or something like it, then do that, because that's a great way to widen the public participation. They will be public because any committee, any public body created by the Board of Selectmen or any other public body is subject to the open meeting law. So just as this committee is right now, we're created by the Board of Selectmen. It at least needs to meet in public, in person, with posted agendas and meeting minutes and everything else. So that's the minimum base that this committee would be. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to make sure that it was members of the public appointed by a public body like the Board of Selectmen, because that would require that.
Mark, were you going to say something?
Yeah, it was, the public will have input just because one of the topics we'd be talking about would be something they submitted to the website or the page anyway. It'd be nice to have other people with different opinions being able to comment. I don't know how you do that, but there will be public input.
And I think I saw Scott, your hand was up as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So one little bit of difference in public comment with a technical committee like this, as compared to more of a legislative like the Board of Selectmen or regulatory like the Planning Board, the vast majority of comments that come through those bodies are topic specific. Planning Board's got something on the agenda, the meeting is there, they're talking about that meeting, they have experts specific to that topic there. When general comments come in through Board of Selectmen, often staff is not in a position to give a detailed response, just because it's not an agenda item, nobody's prepared. That's likely going to happen more often than not with a traffic safety committee. Things can come out of the woodwork from all over the place, and off the cuff responses from a engineering perspective is never a good idea. So while public input and comment is always welcome, the dialogue in this type of committee with these technical topics won't be as substantial as some of these other boards and committees you see. It'll be a lot of like, thank you very much, we'll get back to you. Because it takes hours and hours to research the simplest little question.
Yeah, I mean, I see the.
Mitch, I think you're muted.
Now
you're back.
I can hear him.
I was not muted, but who knows? Maybe my computer thought better of me. I imagine that this committee would have agendas, so they would be talking about, well, do we want to have a crosswalk at this intersection? Would be an agenda item. People potentially calling in to talk about that would be right on topic. And if this committee wanted to have a general public input agenda item similar to what the Board of Selectmen and school committees do, they could do that. But there's never an expectation about getting a response right away there. But it could be an opportunity just for soliciting ideas in general. Again, I would leave that up to the committee to form its own rules as to how it wanted to conduct that level of business.
That sounds great. So for our next meeting, what I'll plan on doing, Scott, I'll put a draft together based on what we've shared today, and then you'll be able to share that with the committee just to gather the feedback so that when we meet next, we'll be able to have a more in-depth discussion on it. Does that sound like a good next step from that regard?
Yeah, perfect. It'd be nice to have a one or two sentence, and I don't want to use the term mission statement because it's way overused, but just a nice summary synopsis of what we are. Here it is, 1 or 2 sentences, and then go through the kind of the punch list of things we have here.
Does anybody, I'm glad you mentioned that because mission statement was on my list and I didn't know if that was going to overlap too much with the charge, but I'm happy to take a shot at the mission statement. But if anybody has anything that's really important that they would like to have included in that, I'm open to any suggestions. Or I'll take a shot at it and then we'll revisit it. I don't want to put you on the spot for that.
Either that or have the members send you an email, just here it is, or send them to me and I'll pull them all together and email them to Laura, say, here's what everybody thinks, and you can make the jambalaya.
It's going to be awesome. I can't wait. Perfect. So the next item on our agenda is our future meeting dates. Has the once a month frequency been good for everybody? Do we want to do it out about a month from now? And I mean, is the 5:30 time good for everybody?
Both are good for me, time and the date, end of the month, every 4 weeks or so.
March 21st seems to be a good one. It's not one of your selectmen meeting weeks. What about you, Bill? Is that a planning board?
That's planning board. Planning board is first and third Tuesday.
Okay,
So we could do the 28th.
yeah,
I don't, would a Monday work?
well, we get the Monday
Or
selectmen meetings.
Monday, the
with,
27th is selectmen. Okay.
Yeah,
What about Monday, the 20th at 5:30?
there's a few events happening that evening.
Okay.
We have a fire station building committee. There's a few other things. That's going to be a busy
Perfect.
evening.
28th at 5 sounds good.
5:30.
5:30 or
I'm
5?
sorry, 5:30, guys. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm looking
do
forward
have-
to seeing you guys again. Pardon?
I do have
Yes.
one more thing.
Yep.
Through the chair. One of our members, two of our members aren't present. One of them, Chris, was notified us that he wouldn't be available likely. The other one is Jen Scalisi. She emailed me, I want to say 2 weeks ago, that there are some personal circumstances in her life that is not going to allow her to continue on this temporary traffic safety committee. It's obviously up to the chair and the committee on how you want to proceed, considering I don't want to say at the finish line, but we're 3/4 of the way there. I'm not sure if filling the vacancy is warranted or not, but I did want to convey that to the committee that she has unfortunately withdrawn due to unforeseen circumstances of their family.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I think at this juncture, bringing someone new included would take a lot of extra time. And I think we've got some good foundation to work with. And since we are going to be making the recommendation to the selectmen, I think holding with where we are right now would be the most logical thing to do. Does anybody have any thoughts on that or disagree?
Yeah, I agree with you, Laura. I'm sad that Jen
Me
had to
too.
step down. But given that we've already done, half to 2/3 of our work, I think is my gut feeling. And it would take a few weeks to advertise and seek additional potential members. We, the Board of Selectmen, appointed all applicants. So there are no other members that applied and were interviewed that are kind of already in a holding pattern for additional vacancies. So my thinking is don't seek a replacement for Jen at this point because they'd be joining really at the end. Part of my thinking there is also we seem to be working very well together and we're reaching consensus. There isn't a thought of, oh no, we've got a bunch of tie votes and we need to make sure we're a full board so we can find a majority. That doesn't seem to be the case with this group.
And I was sad to see her step down. So perfect. The next item is any other business that may legally come before our committee. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to chat about this evening? No. Well, it's been a fun meeting, Scott. Before we say so long, thank you for all your help and thank you for all the good work, especially today, but I appreciate all of your guidance during these meetings. I'm going to move on to adjournment, but if anybody's got any other feedback afterwards, drop me a note. I'll do a roll call vote to end this meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
I'm
anyone?
sorry. Can
That's
someone
okay.
please make
Motion
a
to
motion
adjourn.
to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you. Mark McMenemy. We'll do a roll call vote.
Aye. Or
Bill
bye.
Pierce.
Aye.
Janine Callahan.
Hi.
Mitch Cohen.
Aye.
And I, Laura Zeiton, am also an aye. Have a good night.